Here to discuss what is transpiring now with ISIS, the Vice President for National Security and Foreign Policy at the Heritage Foundation, James Carafano. He joins us from Washington, and staying with us from the Newsmax newsroom, Lisa Ruth, the Lignet analyst who served as an analyst with the CIA. James, as we welcome you in, we want to talk more about al-Baghdadi as the leader of ISIS. Apparently, his resume includes several years working in Afghanistan, and he was right there alongside al-Zarqawi. When al-Zarqawi was eliminated in 2006, that death was considered a huge blow to the organization's leadership. But al-Baghdadi apparently has picked up the ball, so to speak, and then some. How do you rate Baghdadi in terms of his brutality, but his effectiveness, succeeding, in essence, al-Zarqawi?
Yeah, this is kind of like the Ebola of terrorists. I mean, what we have here is they have pulled together all the tactics and things that have worked for transnational terrorist groups over the years, and they pulled them all together and kind of been the best of the best. So whether it's social networking or how they have financed themselves, or how they use the foreign fighter pipeline, or how they do operations on the ground, they have really tried to learn from the last decade of the long war and being all those best practices to use to make ISIS, I think, the most formidable terrorist threat that we've seen in the last 2 decades.
Lisa, earlier we heard Representative Poe describe ISIS as evil personified. Lisa, do you think the brutal death and footage showing James Foley being beheaded, does it change anything, or does it heighten awareness of the situation? Does it redefine ISIS?
I think it doesn't really change anything from the ISIS standpoint. Again, this is something that is completely consistent with their behavior so far. We've seen beheadings on a mass scale in Syria and in Iraq. For the American people, I think it does make a difference. I think it brings it very starkly home to us. It gives us somebody that we can associate with, we can identify with. I think it does heighten awareness. And we talked about polls yesterday. Polls are starting to move. Americans used to say, nothing in Iraq, stay out of Iraq, we don't want to get involved. You look at the polls now, people are starting to say we have to do something. I think this is going to increase that sense we have to do something. And I think that it also, in terms of ISIS, I don't think it changes anything at all. And as we mentioned again, they put out their magazine, and I agree with what Dr. Carafano said. These guys have taken what works and taken it to the next level. But in their magazine, they specifically defined the United States. They said the Crusaders in Washington are among their enemies. So I think this is very consistent.
But Lisa, you said it doesn't change anything, but now more Americans are seeing ISIS as a threat. And so, having said that, how should America respond now?
Well, I'm going to avoid the how we should respond. That's up to the policy.
I should know better when talking about it, right?
I will say, in terms of a military strategy, however, I don't think we can airstrike our way out of this. I think that it will require a much more coordinated effort, and frankly, I think it will require a coordinated effort from more than just America.
Are you talking about NATO then?
I am. If you look at, we've got Italy, Germany, the UK now talking about adding support to this. We've got Cameron in an open letter in the Telegraph on Monday calling for more support. He's going to be heading a meeting in Wales next month of NATO, and I think we're going to see efforts at least to get a NATO force. That also eliminates the unilateral position, and it creates a much more cohesive force. This group is so nimble that I think we absolutely need a coordinated force. I also think we need intelligence, and this is a side that we don't talk about as much, because with just military operations, we're blind. We need to increase intelligence in the region. We really need to step up human particularly, and we need to have those work together to create the most effective strategy.
NATO notwithstanding, James, there have been some who have called almost for a back to the future strategy in dealing with ISIS. In our early days in Afghanistan, post 9/11, we had a lot of covert groups, a lot of intelligence guys on the ground calling in strikes, trying to be nimble, as Lisa mentioned. Do you think, and we got about a minute and a half left, will it be a back to the future response, or would that be the best case scenario in dealing with ISIS?
So here's the deal. So the bombing and the droning and everything, that works great when you're going after formations in the field. But when those guys are pushed back and withdraw to places like Tikrit, you've got to go in on the ground, and the bombing's actually very limited. So there's going to have to be a ground force there, whether it's the Iraqi army or the Peshmerga or something, and they're going to have to fight street to street. But here's the thing nobody's talking about, which really matters, is let's say we win this one and we push ISIS out of Iraq. How do you prevent the storm from just flooding back in? And there's going to have to be an international presence there. Maybe not a U.S. military, but there's going to have to be a military presence there to calm this and to provide a kind of a bulwark while the Iraqis build up the capacity. We made a huge mistake when we pulled out last time. Somebody's got to be sitting there while the Iraqis get their act back together. Otherwise, this is just going to be, break, repeat, break, repeat. That's going to not work.
We will have to leave it there and focus in our next visit on what works. James J. Carafano from the Heritage Foundation in Washington and Lisa Ruth of Lignet checking in from our Newsmax newsroom. We thank you very much. So they say no boots on the ground in the traditional sense, but in terms of covert forces and an international option, you spoke of NATO, we may see that in the days ahead.
Right, and Lisa seems to think that that's the key.
Well, let's see what you think. Why don't you tweet us your comments at Newsmax TV, #AmericasForum.